All right.
Cool, we're live. So, welcome everybody to Creating Great Relationships in Business. We have an amazing person here for you today. Her name is Shawna Beckmann, and Shawna, I admire you specifically because you just conduct yourself both in life from our interactions and online in a sort of like a this is who I am, this is what you get, and you're very just I think you have great community and great connection and amazing sincerity. So thank you so much for being here. And yeah, I'll let you introduce yourself. And yeah, you have your podcast. And yeah, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah. So this is so nice of you to do this and like say that about me. I was not expecting that. Threw me a little off, threw me a little off guard. But basically, yeah, I'll just start with how we met. So basically I was dabbling in the digital marketing world, freelancing, picking up jobs, helping people sell, kind of navigate their own conversations and building relationships in a way that was beneficial to their business. And, we just ended up running in the same crowd. And so we connected fast that way. And, yeah, one thing led to another. And here I am, here I am now, just like helping people sell on the side. And yeah, I don't know. Do you want me do you want me to start from the beginning of my life?
Sure. So what I think would be really, really useful, the way I'm picturing this is I think that people, in my experience, the people listening, and the premise of this series really is if the internet went down today,
Sure.
would your business thrive? And you're immediately someone that I thought of because you're so skilled at really being yourself, connecting with others, that I think it has created so many opportunities in your life and so many connections where you're great at connecting others.
Okay.
You're great at creating opportunities. So I think in terms of what you want to share, I think maybe you could.
I have an idea. This gives me something. Okay, so I just want to make sure the sun isn't like being goofy. So basically, I always loved families, right? Like that was something I wanted to go to school to study for. They're always like, do what you love. And so I went to school and I studied like a version of like public health and family social science.
Yeah.
Well, I got out of college and I had a couple weird jobs, but I eventually landed in a position where I was approaching families for tissue donation moments after their loved ones had died. And it's a really awkward conversation that most people don't want to have. And so I learned really quickly, and especially like you don't want to ever give the impression that you're talking somebody into something, right? Like, especially when we're talking about like tissue donation and they're like in like a really vulnerable position.
Yeah.
So I love that job, and I did that job for like a year, but I had this really, really bad boss who was lying on my like review. So like he would allow me to clear tissue for transplant, right? But he would say things on the thing like I'm completely incompetent. So we had this big fight with like HR and like whatever. And I ended up leaving and picking up cleaning jobs. I was like, it's better for me to leave than to stay. So I started picking up cleaning jobs. I just was like, I'll $25 an hour, like whatever. And so over the course of a couple years, that business grew and grew and grew. Mm-hmm. And when I look back at that cleaning company business, it grew from the source of like 2 or 3 people who had just major connections. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I first started, I basically was like, well, I can clean, but like, I don't really know anything about business. So I asked a lady friend who I admired, and I basically asked her advice, and she's like, read this book, and this book. And one of those books was called The Little Black Book of Connections. Mm-hmm. And in that book, it said, the only difference in your life a year from now is going to be the people that you meet. And that has stuck with me. Like that is like a summed up version of my life. It's been so so profound. And I ran with that piece of advice, and it has carried me through like all different seasons of my life, whether that has been like getting help with my children who are all, like there's 6 of them under 10, or there's like a different career shift, or finding clients as a freelancer. And so I would say my ability to hone in on that advice while building relationships with people who like I like and who I enjoy and like want to be friends with has really allowed me to do all those things that I mentioned.
Yeah. Wow. So
there's a lot there. Yeah, I'll follow your lead.
there is a lot, but I think this is amazing, and wow, it's so fascinating to see like your, even while that's going on, because I think people do have jobs or they have these experiences where they are giving it their all, or they're being sincere, and sometimes it could be a boss, it could be these other things that they feel like they're having to put up with in a sense.
Yeah.
And so just the fact that you had the courage to really take that stand for yourself and move into what it is that you wanted to create or what you knew at the time, what would you advise someone like in terms of tapping into that? And I love that advice of having the people in their life. Like, what would you advise for them when they're in these situations, and it could be they're in a job, or they're maybe they are trying to meet people, but they don't necessarily feel like they vibe with them, because sometimes there's the comparison aspect. How would you advise them to really tap in with that part of themselves, of what they really want and what they're moving towards?
Yeah, I think there's something to be said of like you kind of have to be like to build these relationships or to initiate those like friendships that are really going to be the building blocks of like wherever you're going. I think there's something to be said about like being sticky. Like you have to give something for people to hang on to. And if it's just sort of cold and calculated and everything is like templated or feels kind of sterile, like there's not anything for them to hang on to, like there's nowhere for them to go. There's nowhere for the conversation to go. And that's what the friendships need, right? Or the relationships. They're built on the conversations. And so if there's again nothing for them to like stick to, it makes it really difficult. So I have just like basically, I don't know, I might have read this in a book or like just developed this like just from experience, but there's 3 sort of principles that you want to use or leverage to really initiate those relationships. And it's people will connect with you on shared experiences, shared values, or your shared sense of humor. So like even though I wasn't consciously thinking like which one of these am I sharing today, but like just kind of exposing little by little can really give those people either around you or gravitate towards you when you can do one of those 3 things or a combination of all 3. And that's what you're looking for too. Like building and initiating friendships and relationships is you're also looking for those things, right? So I think that we forget, and this is applied to helping people in the freelance world, which is like you want to be able to find clients that you also resonate with, that you've got good feelings with. And so if you can look for those 3 things, like pitching then just becomes like a conversation about like if there's a mutually beneficial opportunity there.
Yeah. And when you're obviously, I know you said you weren't necessarily consciously like thinking of those principles in the moment, but let's say someone is thinking of those principles and they want to do a better job sharing themselves. I almost perceive that on the other side of that, they may be worried that someone may not receive those things well, which you beautifully just like demonstrate of letting yourself be who you are, and that stickiness that you spoke about, of the humor and all those things. So really them having the space. What is your perception, or how do you view it when maybe someone isn't receiving of that? Because I know some people kind of they use the phrase rejection.
Move on to the next thing. Like just move on to the next thing. There's some friends that I would never talk about politics with, or there's some friends that we really don't have like a lot in common, except maybe the shared experiences. So like, I don't begrudge them that they might not resonate with one of those aspects of my personality, but like we hang tight onto this, like one of those particular things. So like, I wouldn't expect everybody to think that I'm the whole package. So, in the same way that I don't for them. Right. And so I think there's something to be said, like just move on. Like, and if there is no connection, like if you can't find like an angle with one of those 3 categories, like that's okay. Like there's other good people around who are going to be thankful for your friendship.
Yeah. And so I really like this.
Like on the same side, like as much as your life, like is going to change based on the people that you know. Like, aren't there people in your life where you just feel like, wow, like I'm so glad we crossed paths. Like that's good. That can easily be the same thing. Not everybody's meant to be in your life for like forever and ever, right? Some people are just in for a short time. They're in and out.
Yeah, and I think I really love your viewpoint on that because I think I know I experience this, and I think sometimes people kind of treat everything so seriously that it's like you don't have to be the you don't have to be for others the full package, and they don't need to be that for you. And so it sounds like like I have friends that I go to the movies with, or sometimes we talk about politics, but maybe we don't talk about business. And so it sounds like what you're saying is as they meet people. Oh, let's see. I think you might have frozen. Cool. So I think we're coming through. So I'm going to talk for a minute. So really, what I get from what you're sharing, Shawna, is in terms of being the full package, it's about just sharing those pieces with others. It's about really moving towards the progress and seeing the good rather than that you need to fully express everything about yourself with each individual person. That's what I'm kind of getting. I think Shawna might be frozen. We'll see. Let's check in. Let me see if Shawna has sent me a message. Okay, so we'll wait for her to come back for a moment. But yeah, as you're experiencing this, what I want you to get, and I love what Shawna had to share of these conversations, that the people that come into your life are going to make the greatest difference. And so the more people you connect with, the more people that you have to share with what you do, who you are, you're going to pick up on certain things. There's going to be people, right? Because fully expressing is not this idea of I need to share every single part of myself with every single person. They need to love every single thing that I do. I think that can be like a recipe for failure. And so really what we want to begin to look at, and we really want to begin to see, is what can you do now to make progress. So that could be like she was saying, there may be 3 people that are familiar with what you do, or there's 3 people that you're connected with that you can share. And as you begin to build upon those things, like Shawna was talking about starting the cleaning business. And so she left her job, she started cleaning, and those 3 people began recommending her to others. So when you think of your own business, when you think of your own skill sets and where you can be of support, where you can help others, who can you start with right now? And you get to come to it from not like a salesy enrollment process, but a sincere way of being of service, a sincere way of being helpful. And what's going to begin to happen is that you're going to connect with those people in a way that you start to find something that's mutually beneficial. I really love that phrase that Shawna used, because what's mutually beneficial is you're creating a win-win with the other person. And when you begin to operate from that standpoint, you begin operating from a place of it really being about helping others and not just who can I get in my business, or who can I enroll right now, or let me try and sell them this thing. The thing that I joke about with others on is sometimes it turns into, for people, a hey, how's your family? And by the way, here's this thing that I own. Like, that's not what you want to do. You really want to be there with the other person. So let me see where Shawna's at. One moment. Perfect. So we'll work on clearing that up. And so, yeah, as you're checking in with yourself, you can also make a list of the people in your life. This is one of my favorite things to do with clients when they're first starting is who are the people in your life? You can begin to make a list of them. And then what you'll begin to do is you will write down for each person where you see you can help them, where you see that you can support them, and then actually start to create a conversation, right? So when you're creating a conversation, what you really are doing is you may have in the background, a premise of, I want to create more clients, I want to build my business, I want to enroll. You get to set that to the side. It's okay if it's in the background. What you really want leading is helping be of support. So let's see. I'm going to bring Shawna on 1 second. We're back.
Oh my gosh, you're so gracious. I'm sorry about that. It froze and then the whole thing crashed. I was like, oh gosh, sorry.
We're okay. We roll with the punches. It's that's part of like entrepreneurship 101. So I just shared with everybody really the idea of being of service, and I really loved what you had to share of things being mutually beneficial, and that when you were taking these steps, like you saw that you could do cleaning, and there were 2 to 3 people that you had connected with, and so the premise of them making a list of who they could be of service or who they could help, I think and coming to it from a win-win standpoint, I think is amazing. And I really love that you exemplify that. Like, you're always looking for mutually beneficial ways to either connect people or move things forward. Yeah.
And also just like on a spiritual standpoint, I think there's something to be said of like my life is like more like I feel like this is also I also feel like I have like a spiritual experience, like meeting people and building those relationships. Like I feel like I'm also like closer to God in such a way where like my life is more joyful, or like they show up in ways, like my friendships or relationships can show up in ways that pleasantly surprised me that like I wasn't expecting. And so like it again, like I feel like I experienced a little bit of God in those ways that I'm always looking forward to those surprises, like on how this will turn out, or like how I will enjoy something that I don't know I need yet.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. Are you okay if we talk about just the idea of how maybe, spirit, God, and just practice begins to play out in kind of life, because I know that's something that, from what you shared, has really made a difference in your life, and I see you share that with others. Let's say there's someone who I don't know where each person's place is at with their religion or their connection to God. Was that something that naturally occurred for you, or you were raised that way, or is it something that really began to unfold for you?
That's a good question. So basically my mom is like spiritual in the sense of like she had like a midlife crisis and did all this like crazy ghost hunting and bought like all this like crazy bought like all this equipment, like when it was like big on TV, right? All those reality shows. So I always grew up with like a sense of like thinking that there was like something else, but I never had any sort of like formal religious background. My family is not really into that stuff. But later when I was in high school, I basically got plugged into like a youth group that developed my very evangelical charismatic background. And so I went the whole gamut. Like we did missions trips, we did like Bible studies, all this sort of like evangelical culture. But as I as I got married and had a husband who had a Catholic background, he actually was Lutheran, but he went to a private school, and then I got plugged into Catholic culture, and then we'd eventually like be affirmed into the church, and that's how we raised our family now. But
Yeah.
when I was thinking about like how sometimes how sometimes I think that God shows up in relationships is I just wanted to share a quick example. Like I had all these kids and I was feeling like really defeated, like who's going to help me? We don't have any family around, like yada yada yada. And we would go to church one day, and one day like this little old lady came over after the service, told her out her number and gave it to me, and she's like, I'll watch your kids for you, like if you ever need a sitter. And so there's two things that I think that this relates to in terms of building relationship is one is like people are not really tuned into the things that they like. So
Mhm.
me going to church is just like a normal extension of like what I do and what I like. And I was there for a long enough time that it just so happened that at that moment she had passed along her number. Like you'd miss those opportunities if you're not plugged in or know the things that you like to do.
Right.
So I think that's like really important. And then the second thing is that you kind of have to be a familiar face, right? And so
Mhm.
again, like there's something to be said about those connections are built naturally when you're doing things that you like to do anyway, even if you weren't, like paid or whatever, and that you're a familiar face in those spaces where those surprises, those opportunities become really pleasant surprises.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. Especially um, just the idea of the familiarity and being tuned into, your own interests. Because sometimes I think um, people are sort of looking for the place to be, and I really like that idea, right? Like for you, there's the element of church, and sometimes when I meet with clients, and they're asking where to be, and it's the idea of, well, where do you want to be? Like what are your
Yeah.
interests?
Right. Yeah. I think we forget that it's all about like everything happens outside of us. But really, if we just like took a second to tune in to like, I like this thing or I would participate in that, because then the friendships are natural, then the conversations are normal, and then it's never just like this weird, pushy, awkward thing, whether that is something in business or just like a normal friendship.
Yeah, and especially it's so amazing how like giving people actually are. Not only when there's sometimes not familiarity, but when there is familiarity. Like in my experience, people's natural inclination is they do want to help, they do want to be of service. And so I love, just your sharing of,
Mm-hmm.
being at a place and this little lady being like, I'll watch your kids for you, simply
Yeah.
simply because like she has a sense of who you are, or that's how she feels like she could give. And so I think there's so many opportunities that arise, like that you're talking about, that we wouldn't always foresee, but when we can move towards that, like these opportunities arise.
Absolutely. Sorry, I kind of threw a lot at you there. There's a lot of different. There's a lot of
There's
different this is the sticky part I'm talking about. I just kind of like throw a bunch of stuff and whatever you can pick up. That's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. And so this element of, for yourself, of that connection to God, and that connection to spirit. Um, has there been like a shift that you've noticed that really opened up for you, that you thought, I'd like to let this in, or what was yeah, if we were to sort of like slow down, what was that shift? Like you helped me understand like how you got into that. Um, what was the shifting connection like between, like, or just like developing that or cultivating that for someone that might not have a sense of that yet, but maybe they're trying to develop it for whatever their path is?
That's a good question. I think there is um I think it really is the relationships. And I think there's something to be said about like God works through people and he uses people. And so the more that you're open to like those relationships and meeting people and in such a way where like they're also sharing your story, you can see how God moves through their life too. That goes beyond sort of a coincidence, right? When you get sort of so many of those stories, it gets to a point where it's harder not to believe than it is to believe. And
Mm.
so I think just kind of along that way of the people that I've met and the way they've seen God work in their own lives, through like devastating loss or like crazy work circumstances, like all those like sort of funny things that are like, that's like clearly somebody like there's something a little bit more going on here. And yeah, you just get to so just a lifetime of building those relationships where you start there's like a level of truth that starts to be revealed, that there's a hand in here that goes beyond just ordinary circumstances. And so that's how it just kind of, and then just naturally develops more into just like like reading and praying and like searching out different answers to different questions and kind of connecting the dots a little bit for me in terms of like a religious track. But that's kind of how I'd say it kind of opened up and blossomed really my faith.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Because that actually makes me think of it, I think, as, I've started to step into that more.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like an internal trust that starts to be cultivated amongst maybe, some uncertainties. Because I remember in the past when I went to leave a job, I didn't know where I was going. I only knew that I didn't want to be there.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I remember I shared with a boss of mine that I'm going to be leaving, but I wanted to let you know first. We got along, and so I felt comfortable doing that. And he was like, "Is everything okay? Like, where are you going?" And I didn't know where I was going. But immediately I was just like, Portland, Oregon, because I always wanted to be there. And he was like, "Do you have a job there, anything?" And I was like, "No." And so he said, "Okay, we'll talk about it when I see you next week." And then when I saw him, he was like, "You know what? Let's shift your job into this. We'll have it be like an experiment." And I got to travel and go to the place that I wanted. And
That's really cool.
yeah, like, and while I was there, like, this is the part that you had me thinking of. I was staying with a person who was really successful. They used to be homeless, and so I was living with them for a period of time, giving them some rent money, and something happened where I walked out of the door and there was like an eviction notice on the door, and I was like, what's going on here? And all of it, and so I was like, well, what's going on with like the $500 or whatever it was that I've been giving you every month? And they were just like, I've been using it for food. And I was like, okay, some people would like get really riled up. I was like, okay, clearly they got some stuff going on.
Sure.
And I ended up, going for a walk, and I came back and they told me they were, thinking of committing suicide. And so I really walked through them, like processing through, a whole bunch of stuff, helping them, bring more money in the period of like 24 hours, and then like getting them, support and help that they needed. And this idea of like spirit and connection, right? Like without, having an uncertainty of what's next, but being able to trust, like, there's something greater here.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have been in Portland. And then beyond that, it wouldn't have been timed like with whatever was happening for that person, that they were having a traumatic response from when they like used to be homeless. So you just had me like clicking things.
Yeah.
Like,
but there's all kinds of those stories, I bet, in your life where you're like, man, like this is strange. Like you just kind of gets a little weird where you're it's like this goes beyond coincidence.
Yeah. And so I think this is something for those watching where they, maybe it's whatever form is appropriate for them of really cultivating that internal trust, not only within themselves, but a trust that there's something that's beyond them, that is bringing things together in their life in ways that they wouldn't logically say, like, hey, if I do this and then there's this next thing and this is how it all ends up, like being able to almost let go of the control of that and really putting the emphasis and attention on just who can I be of service to right now, or who can I connect with. That's the way I'm looking at it.
You never know what people are going through. Like everybody's got their problems. Everybody's got their own story of like things that they're going through. And so there's been times where like I've received just like a really thoughtful gift at like the right time, or like there was one lady who, like a couple kids in, sent us like groceries, like just a friend of a friend who I'd like maybe met once in person, but like such thought. I don't know, like I just think there's something to be said about relationships where like it doesn't have to be like profound, it doesn't even have to be like long term or like super serious, but just the sheer act of like being like a presence in somebody's life can impact them in ways that I know that I've personally benefited from. And so I part mix being an extrovert, but really just also this core belief of that your life can only cheat, like nothing in your life will be different. The only thing in your life a year from now that's going to be different are the people that you meet.
Yeah. Wow, you give me like little chills there. I love it. I think, I used to be into, like astrology and human design and like all those things. And it began to like shift where, I felt like I was following like these little like maps, and I'm like, this is a little too like conceptual for me. Like it doesn't have enough detail maybe, or I feel like I'm going on the whims. And so it's really shifted in just a connection, like a trust that people are good, they want to help, there's something greater beyond me, and putting a trust there, and absolutely. And wow, if you were to give someone, I guess, these steps of connecting with others and they're connected with spirit, what would you advise them in terms of like, maybe they're in this place, they're saying, okay, connect with others, I have some ideas of what I could do. What would be the steps that you would advise them to perhaps reach out to others?
Yeah, so just kind of step one is the first thing I would do, like what interests you. So like we don't want you to go to church if you don't like church. We don't want you to like go to a book club if you don't like reading. So like really, and you might have to experiment a little bit, right? So like just get curious about your own desires. And then once you do that, maybe even if it's like a kettlebell club, like that's one that I just joined recently where I was like, okay, this is something that I'm interested in and I'm going to commit to it. And if I'm going to commit to it, I'm going to be a familiar face, right? So like, I'm going to see this out consistently and I'm going to put depth into what I'm doing. Again, it doesn't have to be like forever and it doesn't have to be like super profound. It can be whatever. So once you do that and you start building those two, once you initiate those two things, I would take a genuine interest in the other people. And by genuine interest, I mean one of those three categories: the shared values or shared way. You have connection with them. Connection is allow conversations, and then the conversation is going to open up doors. It's going to open up doors. It's going to open up more doors. So, and the more doors is what's going to build the friendship, right? So it's like, again, like it's just going to naturally take a little bit of time. So I think that if you're trying to do those few things, again, it's not profound, it's not complex, but if you can double down on just those efforts, you'll have really great friendships. And I think that when you have really great friendships, like life gets a lot richer.
Yeah. And so I'm just going to recap to make sure I have it all. It sounds like check in with our own interests and desires, and sometimes that takes some exploring. And as they begin to connect with things that interest them, whether it's a kettlebell club or whatever it may be, start to give that time and attention. And as you're there, you'll start to take an interest in the people that are there and connecting with them. And the three areas of connection are shared interests, shared values, shared humor. And so
sometimes this may require you to go first, right? So sometimes you might have to share a little bit of your sense of humor. Sometimes you'll have to convey maybe a little bit of what you value. So it's going to have to go both ways. It's not just like them spewing on you and you're stuck with this new friend that you're not really into, you're not really into, or the opposite, right? So there's something to be said that there has to be, it's dynamic.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what would you say to someone, because I think when this is something that maybe is new for people, or it's perhaps something that doesn't come as naturally to them, and it's like a muscle that they're exercising, when they have those moments and they're taking an interest and it feels kind of, feels kind of funny. It feels like you're trying to find your flow with someone. How do you recommend that they treat that? Because I know sometimes people can get self-conscious of like, oh, they didn't like me, or I messed up, or I did something wrong. How do you recommend they treat that in general?
I think that is perfectly just speak to what you're feeling. So like if you're feeling like a little awkward, or you're just like, man, that question was really awkward, like say that. Like you can just kind of play into it and kind of maybe poke fun of yourself a little bit, see if that gives you an inch. But yeah, I mean, just speak to the honesty of like, oh man, like it could be just speak to what you're feeling. Speak to what you're feeling, and that in and of itself shows vulnerability, which it can be attractive because it shows you're not afraid to say like what you think or what you feel, which conveys to the other person, again, that you've got some level of confidence. So I would just say lean into it, like play into it a little bit. And you don't have to try to hide it. You don't have to try to hide being awkward. You're just like, oh man, I'm feeling really awkward and sweaty. like whatever it is, right? And you can just make fun of yourself a little bit that way.
Yeah, and so it sounds like I think that's actually refreshing for both the the other person, and for perhaps the person initiating that's listening here, because it's not something that they have to hide. I know for me, sometimes I'll meet people and to ease, I don't know whether it's the tension or just my own experience. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, I'm actually a little nervous to talk to you. How's it going? And I actually find that the other person is like, oh, you don't need to be nervous to talk to me. It helps them open up a little as well.
Yeah, you know what's up. Yeah, you're thinking the same thing I am. Yeah, it's absolutely.
Yeah. I remember you had me thinking of. I remember there was someone that I worked with that. They were very nervous to talk to others, and they showed up. It was in New York City, and it was like a hot day on the subway, and they had like pit stains under their shirt. And so it's supposed to be like this event, and they're like, I can't go in. I'm like, it's okay, we'll go in. And that's actually one of the things that I had them start with and be like, oh my gosh, it's like ridiculously hot out. Like they didn't try to ignore the thing. They actually made humor or light of it. And it helped them, and it helped them open up something that wouldn't have been talked about with the other person otherwise.
Yeah, it's if you can empathize in such a way where it's like we're all going through the same sort of like human experience of like ups and downs and pit stains and stress. Like, I mean, it really it makes you relatable in such a way where people are thankful that you are giving words to how they're feeling or thinking.
Yeah. And I think it's the realness of life, even before we came on here, right? Like you asked, how Ellie and I are doing, and I was like, oh, Ellie's on her her cycle right now in the month, and she's watching Selling Sunset, and she just ordered some like hazelnut spread, and I was like, we gotta steal the computer away from you. And so it's funny because I think people see one element of people online, because it's their brand, but most people are willing to connect outside that, and so there's a realness that's there, which I love.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And so it sounds like they take these steps, and the more that they do that, this this building familiarity, that's where the magic starts to happen, where the unexpected connections or the unexpected relating and opportunities begin to emerge.
Absolutely. And in terms of business, yeah, if they don't become your clients, like typically they'll become like huge supporters of your business or connectors to other clients. So again, like just relating back to that cleaning business, like build a couple connections and they happen to have huge networks. Like one was like, yeah, they just had lots and lots of friends. so, you know, and every person has more and more people that they know. And when you only need like a couple clients to be like fully booked out, I mean, it's almost the fastest way to get clients, I think, in my opinion, compared to anything you can almost do online.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Because I think it's just a real sincere and genuine way. And it's actually measurable. I know sometimes when I start working with people, they say, oh, I've been through these courses or I'm doing all these things online, but it feels like, it's actually hard for them to measure. And I think if someone's checking in with themselves, they're able to look, what have I done this week that I'm actually interested in or that I have a desire in learning more about? Have I connected with people? Have I had conversations? Like those are really easily measurable things. And it's also easy to look and say, if I haven't done things I'm interested in, or I haven't, initiated conversations with people from just a sincere way of getting to know people, it's 100% clear of why my business is not making money or doesn't have clients, because those just natural things haven't been done.
I think there's also something to be said about like it leaves a lasting impact. So like it's not like you need to be, I think I just saw that you were talking about follow-ups too. Like you don't have to be like following up with people like every single week. Like you just have to be following up in a way that's thoughtful. Like do you think like a lot of people know, like nobody really asked me how I'm doing and nobody really asked me like what struggles am I really facing with the kids, or like what's really going on in my marriage where I feel like I can trust somebody well enough. And so like there's these things that if you've earned that right to like ask, I'm never going to forget like that I was able to share something, like I was able to connect with somebody and share something that might be going on in my life that I haven't shared with anybody else simply because you asked. Right. So sometimes there's just nobody asking in other people's lives, like how they're really doing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And how would you recommend, how would someone know or have a sense of when they, could like have a pulse on when that's appropriate to like check in or ask a deeper question that's more personal?
Yep. So a little bit of it is intuition, but the way that I like to think about it is there like a connection based on the shared experience, values, and humors? Has there been an ongoing back and forth, right? Like it can't be just like a one-way conversation. They have to give and take, right? So there has to be visible give and take in the conversation. And sometimes that relationship can last in that space for a little bit of time. There's no like hard and fast deadline where it's like, okay, like here's now where it's going to get a little bit deeper, or intimate, or vulnerable. So if I'm unclear about that, or if if I can't quite figure it out based on my own intuition, I'll simply just ask. I'll be like, hey, like I've noticed this, like, is this something that you want to talk about? Or is this something, I just want you to know, like, I'm asking you because of A, B, and C. Like, if you can simply give a reason why you're asking instead of like prying or because you want to sell something, that can give people enough of a reason to really open up then.
Yeah. And I think that's perfect. And in terms of, if some people, how do they begin to find a balance of, maybe they are listening and that person is sharing with them. Let's say, is it something, do you feel like there's ever a point where it's like, okay, this is going deep a lot, or maybe, if this is something that I do as a profession, is there an appropriate way to find a balance there? Or so that way.
Give me an example. Like, what are you thinking?
What'd you say?
Give me an example. Like, what are you thinking?
Like, let's say someone does help someone with relationships, and they're getting to know this person wherever they're at, and maybe someone's is sharing a lot about their relationship. How do you think they find a balance between, okay, maybe I've helped this person quite a bit, but maybe it feels like it's taking up time, and this is something that I do as a profession.
Oh, sure. Like if they've if they've overextended like free help, or they've just like.
Yeah, because sometimes I think that we can have the intention of, oh, I want to be of service and I want to help. And maybe it's like, I like the word you use, like the overextension, like maybe it's morphed into something where they're really leaning on each other, but it's one person's profession.
Yeah. That's a good question. Is there a way that you've done it in the past that you feel like has worked well, or not so much?
I think for me, I usually am very open to talking about something with the person. I'm very much, I'll help, and if it feels like it's become something a little more repetitive, I'll say, this is something that I help people with. Do you want to formalize this into more of like a commitment to really help you? That's kind of how I've shifted that in the past. If it feels like it's something that I'm helping people with, if it's just a friend and a friend's opening up, then obviously I'm happy to help them. If maybe they don't want to make it something more formal, I might treat it a little lighter. I might not feel like I'm investing as much of my energy to help move them forward, but I'll share my opinion. That's kind of some outlooks that I've had.
Yeah. So when I'm thinking about it in terms of a potential client, or like somebody who's going to them, I typically, like, I wouldn't really offer help unless they're aware of what I do. Like, unless that's kind of like a prerequisite, like a pre-step, right? Like if they are not like aware, or it's not been made obvious, like either with my content, like it would be pretty hard. I almost wouldn't help them. So like, or I would make sure that was made clear up front. So but when you're in the thick of it, right? I think just being like, if you've got like, I'm happy to help answer. Like if you've got a particular question, like making them get specific, like I'm happy to help you. Like let's brainstorm some ideas, or like I'm willing to walk you through like X, Y, and Z. But like, let's get really specific on what you want to accomplish, because this could go on and on and on. And I want to make sure that either we can work on solving this one problem, or if you need additional support, we can talk about, this particular package instead. And so that, like, I think people get scared and stressed, like they get stressed out, and the relationship can fizzle out if they feel like backed into a corner. And so by giving them kind of like an option or like a way out, can eliminate sort of that awkwardness of like, well, were you tricking me? Like, and it gives you like a boundary too of like how to navigate the friendship and the thing.
Yeah.
The friendship and the potential client, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like the way you frame that, because I picture some of the people listening that they probably are helpers and they may be in the thick of it, and so I think it's really important, right, from what you shared, and that's kind of what I do. That, and maybe some people are, sometimes they can hide what they do, but I think it's about really owning what it is that you help people with, because when you do that, like you said, if it's something that we help people with, we probably wouldn't be, fully diving into that extent. And so I really like that approach of them being familiar that, hey, this is what you do help people with. And, if it's a specific question, happy to, help a little with that. But if you want to do more on this, we can talk more about that, or we could set up some time. Yeah,
I think people get into trouble in their relationships where they're not totally honest or transparent about like what they're trying to, like what are you trying to do here? Like, right? Like, really just to help them in a one-off, yeah, that's great. Like then tell them that, like say like, I've only got 15 minutes, like give it to me.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like, whatever, but you get it.
Yeah, because I think, I know for me, I like obliterated some connections in the past because I think I helped them. And then all of a sudden, something clicked for me and I was like, I should be charging for this. And so then I did that and it totally threw off the relationship. And I think, it did fizzle out. And so I think there's this idea of them really owning from the beginning of what they're actually doing and if they are a coach or what their business is, because I think sometimes people can be nervous to share that and that's where it starts to get like muddled. And yeah, I really love the idea of them owning that and being able to be honest of what the connection, what that connection is. And are there ways that you recommend they clarify that in the beginning of just what's happening with the friendship along the way? Because obviously they've gone to this place that they're interested in, they're developing interests with people, they're seeing some connection, and maybe they do start to connect more deeply. It's almost kind of like, right, like an intimate relationship where it's like, well, where are we going from here? Are we more serious? Are we not serious? Right? So how do you recommend like they get clear with the other person of,
Sure.
Are we friends? How are we treating this? How do we advance this forward and be almost like on the same page, but save room for like that spontaneity at the same time?
Yeah. So if I'm giving and giving and giving, and it's still kind of unclear about how I could transition into an offer, I would put the pressure off of them and onto somebody else. So I'd say, hey, like, this is what I do for my private clients. Maybe you don't need one-to-one work. So like, again, take the pressure off, get them out of the back of the corner and say, I would love if you could leave a review, share a testimonial, refer me to a friend, send this to somebody who could benefit. So again, it takes the spotlight off of them onto somebody else, but simultaneously let them know like, hey, you have an offer that exists that goes beyond like this little piddly help we've been doing on the side.
Right. I love that word. Did you say piddly?
I did see piddly. I did.
I love it. Perfect. I think this is amazing in the fundamentals and really pivotal, because I think just connection in this way isn't familiar for a lot of people. I think so much has been put online, and it's also created a lot of ambiguity. What would your last words be for someone who's really adopting this and wanting to connect with others? What would be your final recommendations?
Yeah, so just I would double down on the two, right? Like, find things that you're interested in, explore your own curiosities about like what would be something that you could naturally talk about or learn more about that you're curious about. And then the second one, what was the second one? Like radical transparency. Like, if you're feeling awkward, if you're feeling nervous, like, just saying that out loud can really cut through any sort of like tension you might be feeling and really like help the other person not feel so awkward.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much, Shawna, for like, you have an amazing family, and I love how you share them, and you're a mom, and it's actually really inspiring, because I love how you've, at least my perception, have really been yourself and aligned your life. And I just love the way you show up in life. So I really do appreciate it. Appreciate you sharing with others so they can help do that as well.
You are so welcome. I'll talk to you later, James. Thank you so much.
You got it. Thank you. Bye. Cool.